Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Tim Travels. I'm your host, Terry. It's good to be with you. Thanks for stopping by. So on the travel part today, I spent a little time in the Queen City today. Now, some of you may be thinking of Cincinnati, Ohio, known as the Queen City. Some of you may be thinking of Charlotte, North Carolina, also known as the Queen City. But I checked, and it turns out there are about like 30 cities, towns, villages in the United States that kind of either are called Queen City or some version of that, or have adopted that as their nickname. So, but the two cities I mentioned, Charlotte and Cincinnati, are probably two of the biggest that are called the Queen City. Charlotte is called the Queen City because it turns out Charlotte was the Queen of England. She was George III's wife. Now, if you recall, George III was the King of England during the Revolutionary War. What some folks may not be aware of is that George III was actually a German guy, and his wife was from Germany also, and in particular, she was in royalty, for lack of a better term, in a province called Mecklenburg. And if you're familiar at all with the Charlotte, North Carolina area, Charlotte is actually located in Mecklenburg County. Having said all that, though, the Queen City I was in today is Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati is called the Queen City not because of any actual queen, but as far back as 1820, popular press and locals in Ohio, southern Ohio, started referring to Cincinnati as the Queen of the West. Now, you may be like, West? West of what? Well, it turns out that in colonial times, and certainly even after the Louisiana Purchase, which was in 1803, Ohio was the West. In fact, if you're familiar with Cleveland and you know that there's a college there, a university called Case Western Reserve University. Well, Ohio was part of what was called the Western Reserve back then. So, all the way out in Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's pretty far west in the Eastern time zone, it was west. It was way, way beyond what most people knew. Most people lived on the East Coast. They lived in the original 13 colonies. So, areas like Tennessee, Kentucky, southwestern Ohio, that was the frontier. That was the sticks. And even though the whole country was the sticks then, but that's how Cincinnati became known as the Queen City, and it was the Queen of the West, and then it was kind of just shortened to the Queen City. But anyway, the other thing I was thinking of today, and I'll tell you why in a second, was I was thinking of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And if you've been to Chattanooga, if you're involved in trucking, you may know that both U.S. Express and Covenant Transportation are based out of the Chattanooga area. I don't know if their addresses are both Chattanooga, but they're down there in that general vicinity. But the reason I was thinking about Chattanooga is because a tow truck went by me. Now, I see tow trucks all the time, and I see big wreckers and regular tow trucks and heavy lift equipment, but I was thinking that the tow truck made me think of Chattanooga, because Chattanooga is the home of some pretty big tow truck manufacturing companies. The Holmes Company started there, and the Holmes has a wrecker museum excuse me, and then there's also a company called Miller that makes big wreckers. I've been by their facility in the past, but Chattanooga is also home to the International Towing and Recovery Museum and Hall of Fame. I haven't been to it. It gets a lot of good reviews, but you know, it's something that a lot of us don't think about until we need a tow truck. And hopefully, you know, none of us that are driving trucks for a living have to meet one of those dudes that drives the giant wreckers. But if you do, know that that's a thing that kind of started in Chattanooga with the Holmes Company, and then there were other companies. But the other thing that they have there, and I'll just harken back to what I said about things that annoy me about truck drivers. One of the things I said is people not moving over into the left lane when there's a vehicle on the shoulder and they have the opportunity to move over. There is a memorial wall at the towing museum, and it's for people that were tow truck operators. So, you know, when you're driving down the highway and you see somebody, whether it's a little tow truck that's just, you know, hooking a car or a rollback or one of the big wreckers, give them as much space as you possibly can, because they're just out there trying to help somebody, trying to do their job. And, you know, unfortunately, they, you know, get hurt and killed, and that's why they have to have a memorial wall, or that's why they do have a memorial wall. So just keep that in mind when you're out on the road. So anyway, that's a little bit of the travel part today. So the thing I wanted to talk about, and it's this also was inspired by me being in Cincinnati today. I was at a stop and there was another GP Transco driver there, and so we were just outside shooting the bull while our trucks were being unloaded. And he started talking about some stuff, and we were just kind of comparing notes about the company. And you know, one of the parts of our conversation was, you know, turnover. And you know, while GP Transco has an enviable turnover rate compared to other carriers, you know, it's still probably higher than they would want. But that's a product of two things. One is it's a product of them, you know, the company finding that maybe somebody's not cut out for working for them, or just the trucking industry in general, or notwithstanding that the company only hires experienced drivers. And then the other thing is that people just come to a company and it's not what they thought it was going to be. So what I want to talk about today is, because I've talked about a lot of the good things about GP Transco, but what I want to talk about today is reasons why a driver shouldn't come to GP Transco, why you might want to go to a different company. And these are not necessarily negatives in my opinion. In fact, they're not negatives in my opinion. But I believe in being self-reflective, being self-aware, understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, and what is going to work for you. So the first thing is, if you're not a self-starter, GP Transco is not going to be a good company for you. So what are self-starters? People that have initiative, people that just solve problems on their own, people that see something wrong and just take their own action within the ability, you know, within their scope of abilities to fix the problem. And then if they can't fix it, they don't just ignore it. They, as we would say in the military, take it up the chain of command. They go to the next highest person who they think can solve their problem. And they don't quit doing that until the problem's solved. They kind of take ownership in a problem even if they didn't create it. So being a self-starter is important. Being able to operate independently, which is also kind of being a self-starter. But GP Transco is not a company that babysits anybody. I remember my recruiter, Johnny, you know, when I kind of was like ready to make the decision, I said, okay, so what's orientation? You know, how's that going to work? And he goes, you get yourself here. We'll reimburse you, but we're not going to send you a bus ticket. We're not going to send you a plane ticket. We're not going to rent a car for you. You get yourself here. We'll tell you the hotel you can stay in, and that'll be taken care of. But, you know, and we'll reimburse you for food, travel, all that, which they do. But again, if somebody's like, well, geez, I don't know how I can get out to Illinois to go to orientation, you're not the right person for GP Transco. Another thing is accountability. You know, I don't think that the company is really, you know, anybody at the company is really big on, you know, somebody not owning something that they did wrong. It's, and that's just a culture. It's a professional culture. So if you're not a person who can, you know, be professional, you're not going to be happy, and they're not going to be happy with you. Another aspect is running hard. When I'm on home time, I get home time when I ask for it. I've never been failed on any of that. But at the same time, when I'm out, they expect me to run. Now, I will tell you that I run on recap. I'm not a guy that wants to or likes to take 34-hour resets on the road. Having said that, though, it's my responsibility to manage my clock. It's my responsibility to communicate with my driver manager. It's even my responsibility to make sure my truck gets in for service. I don't have somebody that's got a computer that's like, oh, hey, Terry, you need to bring your truck into the terminal because it's due for this service. On the contrary, I tell my DM when my truck's due for service. I tell my DM when I want repairs made and what needs to be done. You know, when I was at night, I blew an airline one time as I was actually pulling out of a terminal. And it was really difficult to get the truck turned around and back into the terminal to get by the shop. I got it to the shop. And then they were like, well, you got to go through the inspection lane. But I was on my way out of town. Like, I had a load on my back. I was like getting on the road. And, you know, GP Transco doesn't do stuff like that. And by the way, that repair, I was talking about that airline, 5 hours plus. That's not how GP Transco rolls. So, for example, about a week ago, I told my DM, hey, I need to get to the shop at some point in the next few days because my truck needs a PM. And so he knew that I needed to do it. I ended up, you know, maybe about 900 miles past what the sticker was telling me, but that's not a huge deal. And I got to the shop. He made the appointment for me. He told me what time to be there. I got to the shop a little bit late, actually, because he had me pick up a load on the way back to the terminal, which is fine. I told him when I get to the terminal, I'm going to start my 10-hour break. So I went in the shop. They said it was going to be a couple, 3 hours before they got me in because I was late. And heck, within a half an hour, they had the truck in the shop. They took care of everything I asked about, and they did the oil change, did the PM, and did a DOT inspection on it. So those guys don't need to be babysat in the shop, but you know, nobody's going to babysit a driver. So if you're, like I said, if you're a person who is not all about solving your own problems to a large degree, if you don't want to run, if you don't want to have really quick turnaround times between loads, don't come to GP Transco. You're not going to you're probably not, you're never going to have a time, because I certainly in over 100 loads have never had this happen, where I sat for like, 3 hours, 6 hours overnight waiting for a load. That's never happened. I'm not saying it couldn't, but I would be shocked if it did. And I also know they would compensate me if that did happen, and I wouldn't have to fight them about it. But anyway, those are some attributes that a driver probably must have to be successful at GP Transco. Like I said, it's a company. It's built on efficiency. It's built on everybody pulling their weight, and I don't want to make it sound like they're not that they're unreasonable or inflexible, because that's not the case. But you got to own a lot of stuff. Your truck is your responsibility, and and that's nice, because, like, for instance, about, I don't even know if it was a month ago, I was just like, what, I really need to get new drive tires, because I have some wear spots on them. It felt like the truck was pulling a little bit. I'm at other companies, I'm pretty confident that I would have had to, fight. I had one company one time that replaced just one drive, or excuse me, I shouldn't say drive, steer. They replaced just one steer, and I was like, hey, my steers are worn. I said, I'll let you take a look at them, but you tell me. And they're just like, yeah, we'll replace them. We'll do an alignment, because they trust the drivers. The drivers trust the mechanics. It's just, one big circle. So those are reasons you shouldn't come to GP Transco. I hope that's helpful. I'm happy to answer questions. I mean, people have emailed me, commented, asked questions. So, it's all about, I think more information is usually a good thing. So, hope this was helpful. And, honestly, if you listen to this and you're like, maybe that's not the company for me, I'm happy, because you'll be happy in the long run finding a company that's a better fit for you. And, quite frankly, I'm sure the folks at GP Transco, whether it's in recruiting or, orientation or whatever role they play, safety, they'll be happy that they didn't have a driver that was unhappy and a not a good fit. And, and that's true of anybody. You have to know your strengths and weaknesses and understand where you're gonna benefit and be able to benefit the company. It's kind of a two-way street sometimes. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe, like, comment, share stuff with your friends who are considering trucking or considering changing jobs in the trucking industry. And I will catch you next time.